So my name's Elizabeth Trask. I work here at the FINA House, and I've been here for almost about a year. I'm a domestic violence and sexual assault program coordinator, so I provide individual counseling, group counseling to victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So today I wanted to talk to you about how it is to work with adult and children survivors of domestic violence. And some of you have probably already worked with some survivors, and maybe you didn't know it, or maybe you did know it. Sometimes people are very vocal about disclosing. Sometimes it takes a little while for them to warm up to you and talk to you about what it is that they're going through. But I'm really glad that you all came here and you all feel that this is an important issue, especially as Steve had mentioned, Domestic Violence Awareness Month is this month of October. So I'm glad that you all came here. I know it's later in the evening, so it's that extra energy, but hopefully we can kind of make this somewhat engaging. So just a disclosure, I like to forewarn everyone that some of this information might be difficult or might be triggering to you. So if you need to step out, take a break, you can do that. Just to let you know also, the bathrooms, if you go out this door to the right, are to the right. So they're right there if you need to use the restroom. I don't mind if you take a break. So I have a quick little survey to ask some of you. And the first question is, have any of you worked with parents and or children who are survivors of domestic violence? If so, just raise your hand. So that's a pretty good amount of people that have. And then can anyone, if they feel comfortable, share a story about working with one of these clients without using any identifiers or any names? Does anyone feel comfortable about maybe an interaction or something that someone told you about what they were going through? It's okay if you don't. I can let you know that. Oh.
I used to be shy. Speak right into this, right? I was working at a place around here, and a woman came in, and I could tell she was nervous. Her husband was, or boyfriend or somebody, was being kind of held aside in another part of the building, and I let her know there was a back stairway, and she could use it if she wanted to, and she did. She came back later with the man. You never know. Yeah. Maybe next time.
Thanks for sharing that story. So I have worked here at the FINA House with a lot of adults and children. A lot of adults will come here with their children as they're here for a counseling appointment. They don't have childcare, so they'll bring their children as well. And even within, a few minutes of engaging with the child, talking to the child, and then having our child and family advocate take over with the child while I provide the counseling with the adult, even during those few minutes, you could tell the child maybe had some sort of behavioral issues, was easily agitated, or was hypervigilant, hyper alert, paying attention to any noise in the building. So we will talk a little bit more about those sort of signs or what sort of symptoms children might show as a result of witnessing domestic violence. And then can anyone, if they feel comfortable, describe how someone might feel if they are a victim or survivor of domestic violence, or DV is what we abbreviate it as? It's okay. Nervous or shy, definitely. Scared, most definitely. So we're going to get more into detail about how someone might feel if they're experiencing domestic violence. So, what is domestic violence? We hear about it all the time, but what's the definition of domestic violence? It's a pattern of abusive and coercive behaviors that are used with the intention of having power and control over someone. And that's what we always look at. We look at the power and control in a relationship. It can be with an intimate partner, an ex-partner, someone in the same household that you're not related to. So it could be a family member, it could be a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, ex-girlfriend. So various different roles and relationships can involve domestic violence. Hi, that's okay. No problem. Glad that you made it. So, what causes domestic violence? There's a lot of myths out there. Some people believe that certain things cause domestic violence that aren't necessarily the case. So we have already referenced power and control. Someone wants to have that power and control over you. That makes them continue to tick and makes them continue to thrive on a daily basis. Some of the other traits of an abuser: low self-esteem, jealousy, feeling inferior. Maybe the person has a lower educational background, or maybe doesn't feel like they have as great of a job as the victim or survivor does. Traditional thinking, we look at that like hyper-masculinity, that some men feel that they are in charge and that they should tell the woman what she has to do, what she's responsible for in the home, that she has to cook, she has to clean, she has to help with the children. And then being raised in an abusive environment, that's a big one for a lot of abusers. If they saw as a child a guardian or a parent or someone that was abusive towards another person, they might think that that's the norm and that that's okay to continue the cycle of violence. And then one thing that we hear a lot is people think that the use of alcohol and drugs is a cause, but it's actually not a cause. It can affect a person and can make a person act out, but we know that it's not the cause of the abusive behavior, because if we think about other people that are under the influence, they don't all behave abusively. So there's usually something more to the picture, usually something bigger to the picture. Does anyone have any questions right now? How are we doing? Okay? All right. So, abusers. Some people think that it's the lower class or a certain race or culture or background of people that abuse, but it's actually everyone. Everyone's capable of being an abuser. It doesn't discriminate any job, any social class, culture, economic class. It can be anyone that abuses. So we know that violence is always the choice of the person who acts on it. It's a decision to behave violently. You think through and act it out on your own. You take that initiative to abuse another person. That's something that you've thought through, that's premeditated. And usually, people that are abusers have a target person, a target child or a target adult that they like to continue to verbally abuse or physically abuse. All types and forms of abuse that we're going to talk about. And they use a variety of different measures to abuse someone. And it can often, we see it starts with verbal abuse. So maybe a few words like, you look fat, you look ugly, or get a job, or take care of the kids right now. Why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you doing anything to help me? That sort of verbal abuse and nagging someone constantly can usually escalate into physical abuse. We see that quite often. And sometimes the verbal abuse is more damaging than the physical abuse. I've had some survivors say, well, the words stay with me, but the scars, they fade away, or the scars, they'll go away, but the words, those are always going to stay with me. So, types of domestic violence: physical, verbal, emotional, and mental, sexual, economic, and financial. So usually we see all of them, a few of them. Quite often it's all types of domestic violence that we see with people that we work with. So with physical abuse, some people think that it has to be hitting or punching, using some sort of force, but it could actually be taking someone's property, taking a cell phone and smashing it so the victim doesn't have a way of calling someone else to escape or for help. Driving recklessly is one that a lot of people don't think of as being a physical form of abuse, but you're putting someone's life in physical danger. Blocking an exit way, throwing objects. So it's not just that sort of kicking and pushing and slapping. So verbal abuse, yelling, arguments, placing blame on someone for everything. We see that quite often, even when it's not the person's fault. And then calling the victim names that are derogatory and hurtful. We see this quite often too with the teenager population and even adults too, sending lots of text messages and calling nonstop. We call it love bombing is what we refer to it as. And manipulation, trying to find ways to get what you want through words. So emotional and mental abuse, almost all domestic violence survivors are going to experience. Threats, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to burn this house, I'm going to take the children. A lot of people use the children as a means to control. It's about that power and control. And then making the victim feel bad, threatening with firearms. Sadly, we see that often, far too often. And then control over the person, who they see, if they're able to see their family, if they're able to see friends. That's a common theme we see all the time. And oftentimes when survivors escape, they say, now I can finally do the things I've wanted to do. I can go to the gym, I can see my family, I can see my friends, all the things I've wanted to do, I wasn't able to do when I was with the abuser. So sexual abuse, forcing someone to engage in sexual intercourse or activity. Sexual harassment, making comments to someone that are uncomfortable and unwanted. And then threatening the person to have sex or they'll make the violence worse. Economic and financial abuse, we see this all the time, especially we see it within the housing realm because people are not able to escape because of the cost of rent and the cost of owning a house here in Massachusetts, and the limited options of shelter too make it really difficult sometimes for someone to escape that has limited financial resources. So we see stealing money from someone, threatening the victim to do certain things, or they'll withhold money. I have one client that I've worked with, and the abuser said, I'm not going to give you any money for the kids. You're not going to get any money for clothing or food or rent. I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to give you any money for anything. So of course with that, I had to file a report to DCF too, because the kids didn't have any clothing, they weren't being fed, they didn't have adequate shelter at the time. And then preventing the victim from obtaining education or a job. Usually abusers want to keep victims in the home, want to keep them isolated, away from everyone. They don't want anyone to know what's really going on behind closed doors. And ruining credit, that's a really, really big one that has an effect on someone for their whole life. So this is just an example. Which all of these types of domestic violence can have a lifelong impact, and that's why it's so important that if you see something, you're able to help the individual and able to address the needs and concerns of the person. And we'll get into that some more too. So we're going to move on to how domestic violence affects children. So this is a wheel that has all of the different types of abuse and how it can affect children. we know that, children can act out physical and mental effects. Kids can feel guilty, shameful. They can be cranky because of the abuse that's happening at home. They can act agitated in school. They might be missing school, not going to school is another sign. They might, yell or scream or punch or hit or not be able to concentrate or listen is another big thing. And then often it says intimidation. That's a big one, and that I had previously mentioned was that, putting the children in fear too is something that abusers often do. It can be, loud voice, smashing things, and sometimes you'll see those learned behaviors that kids take on through play, especially the work that you're doing with the kids. You might see a kid acting out. It doesn't necessarily mean that the kid's witnessing domestic violence, but it's maybe something to keep in mind, how the child's home is, if they're safe at home, who are their parents, who are their guardians, how do they treat the child? Any questions? So some more effects of domestic violence on children. Their sleeping can be affected, their eating patterns, definitely. Some kids just might want to binge eat or overeat to cope, that sort of emotional eating, or they just don't eat at all. And then clinginess, I've seen that here with kids. They stay really close to mom, and they hold on to her leg. Everywhere mom goes, they hold on to. They don't want to leave mom's side, and they become really protective of the survivor, the victim, guardian, or parent, and they intervene sometimes when there's physical or verbal altercation, a lot of crying, being fearful of new things or maybe a new setting, a new atmosphere, or if they switch schools, being fearful of going to a new school, and then nightmares, anxiety, not having as many friends, not talking to friends or being social, wanting to be alone, unfortunately bedwetting. So there even more too, the list goes on and on. Anger outbursts, that sort of screaming for no reason, yelling and screaming or punching, low self-esteem, calling other children names, and then hitting, biting, slapping other peers during play interactions, headaches, stomach aches, as the child's going through a lot of stress too. The stress that the victim's experiencing, that child's experiencing too. And I've had a lot of kids say things that you think, oh my gosh, that child's only 4 years old. How do they know that? One child said to me when she was here, she heard a police car go by, and she said, oh, it's the police. They're going to get Dad. Dad's been bad. They're going to go get Dad. And I said to her, what did Dad do? Dad hits Mom, and Dad says really mean things to Mom. That police car's going to get Dad. The police are going to take him. And I said, have the police taken your dad before? Yes. They're going to go get him. Dad's bad. Dad's a bad person. So 4 years old, and she knows all of this, has seen so much. And yet her behavior with me, she was pretty mellow, but when she heard something like police sirens or heard someone, even just someone getting up, she would look all over the place really quickly, very startled. And then constant worry about danger. Maybe that sort of overprotectiveness, trying to make sure that the victim, survivor, guardian, parent is okay. Where's Mom? Where's my aunt? Where's my cousin? So, and then also in some cases with adolescents or children, criminal activity. Maybe to cope, they get into using substances, or they, start to get into some trouble with other people. They associate with the wrong people and fall through the cracks. So we really like to try also with the domestic violence education and prevention. We like to try to go in the schools. At a young age, we feel like that's where a lot of difference can be made if we teach children about healthy relationships and healthy behaviors with children. So we have teen educators through the YWCA that go into the schools and they talk about intimate partner violence, teen dating violence. They talk about healthy relationships. And the students have learned quite a bit and talked about even their personal experiences sometimes too. So, a few things about what we know. We know that more than half of people that abuse their partners also abuse their children. So we know that the abuse is going on with the partners and the children at the same time. And then 90% of children who live in homes with domestic violence are aware of the abuse, which that's pretty obvious. Children aren't going to be able to hide from it. You can hear it going on. There's not really any sort of escape for the child. So we often do safety planning with adults, but we can even do some safety planning with the children too. We can teach the children how to call 911. That's something, unfortunately, that kids even today don't know how to do. They're not being taught that sometimes. And then instruct them where to go. If things escalate, maybe they can go to a neighbor, maybe they can call a relative or a family friend. It's sad to think that you'd even have to go that far as to telling a child what they could do, but sometimes it can protect people. It can keep them safe in these situations. And then coming up with a code word to say. We do that often even with the adults. We come up with a code word. Some of my clients, they're not able to talk over the phone because their abusers have so much control or have access to their phone records. So we'll come up with a code like, it's not a good time to talk right now, or I'm going to go take the dog out for a walk, or come up with something so that the abuser doesn't know who they're talking to, or I'm going to a doctor's appointment instead of going to a counseling session. So, and then the house also, like identifying a room they can go to or something that they can think about other than the violence. And then teaching them that although they want to protect the parent, that they should never intervene. They should never go in to the violence. They should never try to break up an argument or a fight. And then also, there are programs out there, and I have some for you to give to you too, for children. There's counseling programs specifically for children who have witnessed domestic violence. So it's always great if a child can talk to a counselor or a therapist about what's going on at home, how it's affecting them, maybe how it's affecting their interactions with other children, or how it's affecting them at school, because it really does affect their grades, affects the school attendance. So I have a short little video here to show you.
A child who lives with domestic violence lives in darkness. She sees things no child should see, and hears things no child should hear. She struggles to separate her nightmares from reality because there's very little difference. The child who lives with domestic violence isn't afraid of the dark. She's afraid of her dad because the monster doesn't live in her closet. It's just down the hall. And when she grows up, she'll be more likely to be abused. And her brother, he'll be twice as likely to become a monster himself because that's the world they know. When a woman lives with domestic violence, she's completely devastated because the person she should be able to turn to has turned on her. And she thought he'd change once they got married, had a child, or when he got a better job. But he never did. And she's tried to make things better, but she can't make him stop. So when she locks the door at night, she's not keeping danger out, she's keeping it in. And she feels hopeless, ashamed, and completely trapped. When a woman lives with domestic violence, she hears voices. And she feels completely alone. But she's not the only one. Maybe you don't live with domestic violence. Maybe you don't wake up every day shaking or jump every time the phone rings. But maybe you should look a little harder. Maybe it's a friend, a coworker, or your neighbor. And maybe you could offer support, a number to call, or point to a way out. Your help could make all the difference. We need everyone to bring domestic violence into the light.
You're probably wondering now, what can I do after seeing that? And so one thing you can do while you're working as volunteers is you can go, if you're in the shelter setting, you could go to the shelter staff if you see something. Or you could go to someone else that's supervisor, or you could go to another volunteer and talk to them about what's going on. But make sure that you're bringing it up and you're talking to one another about what's happening. And some of those signs that we talked about that children are displaying, they could be related to what's going on at the home. It might not be what's going on at the home, but it's good to at least be aware that some of those signs can be related to children witnessing domestic violence. And usually those sort of behaviors, any sort of punching or fighting or swearing or yelling, is being learned from someone. We know that. It's not something the child just starts to do. I had one child that came here with his mother, and there was a lot of domestic violence at the home. She escaped the domestic violence, came here with her child, was placed in a shelter in Massachusetts. The child here was just horrible. His behavior was awful, and I've worked with a lot of kids before, and I have never seen a kid act out so badly. Rolling on the floor, all over the place, kept pulling his pants down, and then kept swearing, every swear in the book, he was saying. And I had to ask a couple of other coworkers to help me with the kid because he just wouldn't listen. You know, he wouldn't come down. He would try to do an activity with him, and he'd just start swearing and wouldn't be able to sit still. He was rolling all over the floor, wanted to be like throwing things, and you would give him like something to write with, and he would just throw it. And he was like 3 years old, and his behavior was the worst behavior I've ever seen of a child that age. Especially, I think, the vulgar language he was using, that made me so concerned. But hopefully, they're okay, they've escaped, and hopefully the child's able to get some sort of counseling or therapy as well. So something you can do is you can certainly refer people that you're working with and families to the YWCA for support. We have a child and family advocate here, and she works with the children. And then I really like working with the children, so sometimes I'll talk to them if I'm free and I don't have any adults that I'm working with, and I enjoy that a lot. But there is help for them, and we often make referrals out to children, friends, and family for counseling, or they can call, families can call on the back of their insurance, they can call and see what providers are in the area that would help with children who witness domestic violence or children counseling. Our child and family advocate does a lot of play therapy and art therapy with the kids, which the kids really like, and sometimes it's easier for them to act it out or draw a picture of how they're feeling. So that's been really, really helpful. And then there's a few programs in this area. I know some of you are working some in Boston, some in the North Shore, some in Merrimack Valley here, just to kind of get an idea who works in the Merrimack Valley area or volunteers in Merrimack Valley. Okay. And then anyone in the Boston area and North Shore area? Okay. So a lot from Merrimack Valley. Where are you in the North Shore? In Peabody. Okay, great. Excellent. So in this area, we have the Holy Family program, the children who witness domestic violence through Holy Family Hospital. and they provide free counseling to the children. And then there's also a program in Boston through Boston Medical Center too that provides counseling for children. It's limited, which is sad, because I think there's a lot of kids that are experiencing domestic violence and they're secondary survivors. And then you can provide non-judgmental support to the children and the adults too. I think that's one of the biggest things is being that person that just listens, being the person that just actively listens to what the person has to say, what they're going through, and not passing any sort of judgment. Like, the worst thing you can say is, well, why haven't you left yet? Because if it was about leaving, you would just leave, you'd walk out the door. But it's about escaping, trying to come up with a safety plan for yourself and your children so that you can escape and make it. And then another big thing is just simply asking what you can do to help, even with the child. So, what's going on today? Well, you know, is everything okay? You seem kind of upset. You seem sad. You seem different. Usually, you're really happy. Usually, you're really outgoing. Usually, you're having fun here. What's going on? Is everything okay? Do you want to talk? Maybe providing that space for a child too, if you can. You know, if it's in a little corner or a little area where you can have some privacy with the child and saying, you know, what's happening? Do you want to talk about what's going on at school or home? Is something wrong? And getting to see if they would open up to you a little bit. Anyone have any comments or thoughts? Questions? So some of the services that we provide here, we provide domestic violence individual and group counseling. It's free and it's confidential, which is wonderful for a lot of people. They're worried about their insurance, or they're worried about the abuser seeing that they went for counseling or therapy somewhere. And then we provide safety planning. So some of the safety planning that we talked about for the children, we also do the safety planning with the adults too. Having a list of people that you can call or a list of phone numbers, having your important documents with you, birth certificates, car information if you have a vehicle, all those documents that you need, driver's license. If you were to escape, what do you need to bring with you? Your medication, your doctor's phone number. And then we provide court advocacy too. So here in Lawrence District Court, we have 3 bilingual court advocates that help people obtain restraining orders and harassment prevention orders. And then we also help out with the shelter process. We have an undisclosed emergency shelter, that's a mouthful, emergency shelter here in Lawrence. It's a small 5-family unit shelter, and it's always full to capacity, which is a problem that we see quite often with the domestic violence shelters in Massachusetts. So then we turn to SafeLink, and SafeLink is run by an agency in Boston called Casa Myrna, and they keep track of the domestic violence shelters in Massachusetts that have availability or room. So we will usually work with the client and call SafeLink, see if there's anything available. And then if there is, we'll help them with the intake with the agency that has space. So you could even give this number out to someone, and they can call on their own, and they can call every hour for shelter to see if there's any space available. It is really tough, though. Sometimes, for whatever reason, I think that there are certain days of the week, like sometimes Mondays after a weekend or after a holiday weekend, maybe on Tuesday, everything's full. So then the next step would be to call out of state to New Hampshire, Connecticut, Maine, Rhode Island, and sometimes some people will go. Some people just want to start fresh for their children, for themselves. You know, they'll do whatever it takes, even if it means the child has to leave all of his or her friends, go into a new school system. They'll do it for safety, change their address, change their identity. We had someone come here yesterday from Social Security, and she talked to us about how domestic violence survivors can actually get a new Social Security number assigned to them now. So there are definitely ways for protection, for safety. We work closely with the Lawrence Police Department, Methuen Police Department, North Andover Police Departments as well, making sure that the restraining orders have been served on the abusers, making sure that they've received notice that this restraining order is in effect and to not violate it. And then we also provide medical advocacy. So during the work hours, if we get a call that's a domestic violence case or a sexual assault case, we'll go to the local hospital and provide emotional support resources to the patient so that they don't have to be there alone. And then we provide a lot of referrals too, out to other agencies and out to medical providers in the community, therapists, social workers, psychiatrists, attorneys. So that's pretty much the bulk of what we're doing. It's kind of a lot all at once. We also have our own hotline too for domestic violence and sexual assault. And then these are a couple of the resources, and I have paperwork to pass out to you all. If you're interested in keeping those resources, you could always mention it to a family member. I'm not sure how the program works exactly. You must have, I guess, maybe family members, parents, guardians bringing the children to the programs, or how does that work?
In the play space?
Yes.
So it's basically, they're all kind of set up like a Y here.
Okay.
The families living at the shelter.
Okay.
So the moms, we say the moms, but if they're out of hours, they bring them to the play space.
Okay.
And then they pick up the children.
Okay. So you might have some sort of interaction with the parents or guardians, and you might be able to provide a resource that could benefit them. If you hear a child that says, I saw mom hit dad, or I saw dad hit mom, it can go both ways. Then maybe you speak to the guardian or parent.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt.
Or you don't want to do that? Okay.
And again, this is
What your protocol is.
thing, that we try to keep the boundaries.
Okay.
We want the pals to be there. They want, to be like the cool aunt, the cool uncle.
Right,
They want
okay.
children, But if something does come up, we obviously want you to tell somebody, but as you know, you just tell the shelter staff.
Shelter staff only, okay.
Yeah. But that's all right.
Yeah, sorry. Because you want to react or you want to do something, you want to say something, but so like Steve said, it's best just to go right to the shelter staff and talk to them and debrief what's going on.
Yeah, we're in a shelter where the mothers, general mothers, have already left.
Oh, okay.
The safe house.
Okay, I see. So it's different probably from site to site or shelter to shelter.
But there can be behaviors that were,
Right, exactly.
that
Right.
kids are exhibiting.
Oh, most definitely. You've probably already seen some children acting out, or your children say something inappropriate or vulgar to you, and they've learned that from somewhere.
On that note, so kids are kids. Some kids bite, some kids get angry, they act out, who haven't been around domestic violence. Is there, like when you see is there a way, is it that much worse where you can tell that a child is witnessing or has witnessed this? As opposed to just being a child who's having a bad day and lashes out?
I would definitely say that usually if a child's exhibiting any of those symptoms that I mentioned, it's usually pretty bad. You can usually tell that the behaviors are enhanced or worsened because of what the child's seeing at home. Like it's, that certain ages developmentally, some children, like everyone says, the terrible twos. Like some kids will act out or behave a certain way because of their age. That's just common. But you will notice with kids that have witnessed domestic violence, a lot of them are one extreme or the other. Some are really, really sad, really quiet. They don't really have much to say. Some are really vocal, really angry, really upset, and they want to talk about everything. Like the little 4-year-old girl that I worked with that said, there's the police, they're going to go get dad. She wanted to tell me everything. She wanted to tell me everything going on at home. And some kids might want to talk to you, and then you would, of course, want to notify the shelter staff there and let them know what's been said or what's going on. But I would definitely say that the behaviors are usually pretty severe when children are witnessing domestic violence. You can tell, and most kids, I'd say for the most part, most kids will want to talk about what's going on. If you ask them, oh, well, what's going on today? Or how was your day? How are you doing? You know, how's home? How's school? How are your friends? How's your family? Most of them will start to talk about what's going on.
When you're working with children, do you have any suggestions to the pals as far as if they are acting out like a guiding behavior?
Right.
If they're exhibiting this,
Right.
this might be an activity to do with them?
Definitely. Well, one thing I would highly encourage is to not use the word don't. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but once you tell a child, don't do this or don't do that, what are they going to do? They're going to go do it. It's like telling someone, don't press the red button. Don't press it. What are they going to do? They're going to go press the red button. So one thing I would say is if a child's acting out, just stay away from the word don't, because they're just going to misbehave even more. Sometimes with the children, I have found for whatever reason, music helps them. So I'll ask them, what kind of music do you like? Oh, I like Frozen. So, okay, then let's listen to Let It Go. So even that would help with kids. The music is really calming to them and soothing to them. And then also a lot of like the art activities, hands-on activities, some of them can stay focused. You know, even with just a little bit of guidance, some of them are able to sit down and stay focused. Our Child and Family Advocate has been so creative. We do yoga with them too, which they love. They pick an object, you know, outside, like a tree, and they do a tree pose. So anything sort of like physical too can actually be really helpful for some of the children. Some of the young boys that I've worked with, even just hula hooping, they love it. They love hula hooping, or just passing a ball along to each other, or bowling. They like to do that too. So anything sort of physical that you can do with the kids. We do a lot of team building activities too, and like problem solving with the children, and that can be helpful to them because it makes their mind think a different way. Like if I was at home in this situation, maybe I wouldn't scream or outburst. Maybe I will be able to stay calm and transfer that over to their play too, like remain calm, it's okay, it's gonna be okay. And I think just as simple as asking the child, what's bothering you? What's wrong? How can I make this better for you? Sometimes that goes a long ways if you just listen to what the child has to say or how the child's feeling. Most of them will talk, I have found. Most of them want someone that's going to listen, someone that's not mom or dad or parent or guardian, abuser or victim. They want someone that's completely neutral, that will sit down and listen to them.